you're going to fill your glass with ice. You're going to do mostly soda water in there. And then you're going to top it with pomegranate juice and lime juice and whatever other juice you have in the fridge that might be refreshing for you this evening. But the goal is mostly seltzer water and a little bit of juice. It should be light, refreshing, but a little bit more oomph than your normal LaCroix. If you'd like to make it boozy, which I know Rini does. So what you would do instead of the soda water, you're going to do an ounce of vodka and 3 to 5 ounces of champagne, depending on how big your glass is.
I don't know why you want to waste champagne on it. Prosecco will do.
Prosecco or cava will also do, just a dry sparkling wine. So those are our cocktails for tonight. I don't have the ingredients with me here at the office, but that's what that looks like. We're back on time here for you, Dhruva. So I'm going to hand this over to you to begin the panel. Thanks so much.
Before we start the panel, I do have some announcements to make before people drop off. Okay. One major announcement is that Zettabytes is going to be there this Friday at Stonewall. There is an art opening of lesbians. I forget what the whole title is. All I know is it's a dyke show. Lesbians are showing up in full force. There are all the artists are women identified with transgender women. Also, it includes one non-binary person and also lesbians as a whole, presenting art and photographs at Stonewall. They are going to have refreshments and everything, and I think the event starts at 4 and goes up to 8. I know that Robin, Dhruva, and myself are going to be there. Vinny, I don't know if you're joining. We would love you to come. Rachel, I think all of us are going to be there somewhere between 4 and 8. So please join us at Stonewall. So that's first announcement. The other announcement I have is I don't know what you'll are waiting for. You'll need to become Zeta Stars. So do look at the Zettabytes.today website and make sure that you sign up as a Zeta Star in the Join Us page, and come join all the events. Usually, Vinny and Chris does this fabulous demo of making beverages. We bring in other comedy events when available, especially for the virtual event. We, of course, have a community partner showing up. But come join us. Be a Zeta Star. And straight allies are also welcome.
Thank you for that, Rini.
All right.
But I got to give you the shepherd's hook too. It's time for our feature presentation. I've been waiting for it all day. I'm excited. I hope you're all excited too. If you know someone who dropped off during our community partner presentation, get them back on here because Dhruva's ready to go with this panel. So I'm going to turn it over to our lovely Dhruva to begin our change management and technology panel. Go for it, my dear.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Rini, for all those reminders as well. I totally forgot about the art exhibit. I'm so excited to go to a gallery in person and see art again. Okay, everybody come meet us out on Friday. If you're in Columbus. If not, then, I think there's plane tickets available. So yeah, let's talk about change management and specifically leading through change. This is a huge ordeal. I mean, we've all heard those terms, the only constant is change, all of that stuff, it's repeated. So today we want to definitely discuss that. We have 2 leaders of change management here with us. We're very, very lucky to have them in our company to get from them all the knowledge and experience that they've gone through, so that hopefully it alleviates some of the challenges for us. As we all know, there's challenge there. We have Ann Beard. She is with Alliance Data, and she heads up their change management there. And Karan Froom, who may or may not have a dog in the back. And she is right now the director of their change management at Clorox. Previously, she handled the data migration at Cardinal Health. So thank you so much for being here with us, Ann and Karan.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yep, thanks for having us.
So we have a ton of questions. I'm sure as we're talking, things will come up. And if they do, please feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't address them right away, we will definitely circle back to them afterward. But I know that as we're talking, I know this will trigger, hopefully not any PTSD for any of you, but it might trigger some thoughts or questions or how it's applied in your specific scenarios. And we can definitely talk about that kind of stuff too. So let me start off by asking, what were some of the challenges with rolling out a large transformation specifically during the pandemic? Who wants to take that on first?
I'll start. So, we're in the middle of a very large transformation at my organization, and some of the challenges that we've run into are, mostly the communication methods. So prior to the pandemic, you could do drive-bys and talk to people and have face-to-face conversations, meet with people at lunch and do all that stuff. And through the pandemic, everything became very virtual. And also, you can't just stop in at somebody's, you have to schedule time. So we've really been challenged with what are the different communication methods that we can use, and how do you reach out to people and get those folks engaged when you can't just stop in their office. I'm a big proponent of reading the room or looking at people's faces and things like that, and it's really hard to tell if people are engaged, especially when they're not putting themselves on camera, which is a big problem at our organization, where people are multitasking while you're trying to chat with them. So I think the communication and learning new ways to communicate with people has definitely been a challenge during the pandemic for me.
Yeah, I would echo that, and hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm having a little bit of issues with my audio today and my internet, so give me a thumbs up if you guys are good. Good? Okay, I can see a few of you. Yeah, so actually at Cardinal Health, I led a very large ERP transformation. So it was the largest SAP program in North America at the time. And we were right in the middle of our transformation when the pandemic hit. So in 2020, getting ready to move into our testing phase and starting to develop our training. So as you can imagine, we had to pivot and change really our entire training strategy to go fully remote, not knowing at the time where we would end up. In 2020, we thought, oh yeah, we're going to go home for a couple of weeks, we'll come back and it'll all be good. And we all know that story, I think, at this point. So we really had to pivot and think differently about how we rolled out training to end users. Creating smaller modules of content, doing a lot of self-study that was all online, so people could, access it through our learning management system and engage with it that way. We had to schedule virtual instructor-led training, as you can imagine. And again, to Ann's point, looking at different communication methods. Unfortunately, in our warehouse, we really did not have people leave, or they couldn't stay home. So we had employees on site, but we also had restrictions on who could be there, face to face with them and talking to them during the pandemic. So we did have to look at, we did some marketing campaigns, some posters, a lot of visual aids as well during that time frame. But it certainly was, unexpected and challenging, in the middle of this large project to send everyone home. We had over 2,000 people on the project, and, we immediately pivoted and all started working remotely at that time, just like everybody else did in the world. But amazingly, that project was rolled out very successfully, which I'll talk more about as we go today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the way that we have to pivot in order just to even be engaged, especially with the multitasking and all this. I'll even share, there's something I did last year that was a little bit different than ever before. We did something called cohort learning, where we, like whatever trainings or whatever tutorials that had to be watched, everybody watched them on their own. And then in small groups, they got together to kind of discuss them. And then with the larger group too. And I think that helped some of the retention of it.
Hey,
So,
Dhruva, when you say we, who do you mean?
oh, I'm sorry. I meant at where I work. My day job is at Nationwide. We're on your side. You know them. Sorry about that. I should have led with some introduction of who I am.
Can I add something as well? I think there's also like that feedback loop. So understanding where people sit today, where they are with the change is also challenging when you don't have like people can hide behind that screen now. They don't have to provide feedback. There's a lot of that. Whereas before you'd actually you could see people and you could see how they're interacting and see where their challenges are. So learning how to get feedback in a new way and having people be open to that feedback. So again, surveys are great as long as you can keep them truly anonymous, which is challenging. But you also have to understand where the challenges might be within the organization for some of that resistance. So there's a lot of new challenges that we haven't experienced in the past.
So are you telling me, Anne, that, by the way, for full disclosure, Alliance Data is my active client right now. So are you telling me, Anne, that I cannot bomb team meetings anymore? Like the drive-by in person that I could do?
Nope, you can't do that anymore. Unfortunately,
Okay.
we know when you're coming and going, and we
Going,
stop
right.
talking. So it's,
That's right.
yep.
Let me also ask, so as we're talking through all these, like with the pandemic and the disruption and all this stuff, what changes did you have to make in order to be successful with your launch?
I'm sorry, as far as changes go with our launch? Yeah, so we, one of the big changes that we had to implement, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term hypercare, but one of the things, so if you think about a large transformation happening in an organization, once the system goes live, you provide a period of support, hands-on support and answering questions for end users so that they feel like they can use the system. They've gone through training, they've gone through your change plans. Sorry, this is my dog Squiggy. He likes to join my calls. And so we've gone through all of those activities, and then how do we make sure that the end users really know how to how to use the new system, follow the new processes. So there's a plan in place that we call hypercare, and that's a period of time, could be anywhere from 2 months to 6 months to 4 months, whatever period of time you want to set up. At Cardinal, though, we had to look at doing our hypercare remotely as well. And this was a big undertaking. And there's actually a couple of folks on the call here who probably can talk about it better than I can, because I know they're still working on some of these activities, Amanda Rice and others. But the work that we did there was setting up team sites, and we actually leveraged teams in a different way, right? You normally think about teams as setting up for end users just to talk, or small team groups to talk together. We set up team sites for each of our individual stakeholder groups so that they could post questions and we could respond to them, that way. So it was real time Q&A. Also, like making sure that tickets were put into IT at the right time so that they could be responded to, and then following back up and using that as a communication and feedback loop back to our end users who were having, if the system was down or having some system issues. So that was something I think that was pretty new at the time, and turned out really, I would think, really well. I might look to Amanda to give me a thumbs up on that, but I feel okay. I feel like that was successful in the face of what we were looking at. In the past, we would have had people on the floor walking around talking to people and answering questions. Certainly couldn't do that in the environment that we were in at the time.
And I will second that. So as we're building out, we're getting ready to do our transformation, but as we're rolling it out, we're having to build a command center, but not as a typical, I would have called it a war room in the past, where you have everybody in the room, you have stuff on the walls. Like, how do you build that remotely? So how do you make sure all the people are connected that need to be connected? We too are utilizing Teams because we use it as an organization, but really making sure that people understand when to engage, when not to engage, who are the right, getting those lists and those people together up front. And so we're really working through that right now. So we're ready in a month so we can do the hypercare for the next, 60 days after that.
And as you're interacting with these groups and getting the feedback and everything, you're obviously working with a larger number of people. So you have your whole, like, not just like team that's doing the, the organizational change management or whatever, but all the end users as well. So let me ask about how you work within the confines of the existing culture, because that culture is more persistent throughout all the people.
Yeah, so understanding the different levels within your organization is really important, I think, to work in that culture. So understanding who the key players are, who that what are the different areas of the organization and how they interact together. I really have taken a lot of time to understand maybe even like communication methods. So one group may have a communication method that works really, really well for them. It doesn't necessarily work for others. So it's engaging those different business leaders in those different areas to understand what is going to work best for their folks and really engaging them. The more you can engage the leaders and other people in the organization, you have more people who are going to be your advocates. And so those people can help drive the messaging. They can help be the proponent for your activities. They'll help you spread the message. So we've also created like a change network at our organization that we have agents and leads within each different area of the business. We're utilizing them to also push out the messaging. So it's how many different people can I use within that? And they can adapt the messaging to the culture of their area as well. They understand that better than I will. I mean, every area of the business has a little bit different culture. So if you can give the message to the folks who know that best, they can actually provide that information to the people in that area better than I can.
Do you have anything to add, Karen?
Yeah, I would just echo. I mean, we did something similar. We appointed change leads for the business. It wasn't really a change network. They were actually kind of an extension of my team. But we had about 486 different stakeholder groups. So we obviously couldn't know each one of those groups and the kinds of subcultures that those groups had within them. But we relied on a leader within those teams to really help disseminate the information that my team was creating, from an engagement perspective. So those change leads were really pivotal for us, in being our eyes and ears with our end users and making sure that whatever we created from a change, we did some start, stop, continue documents, like what's changing documents, that those leaders could then take that information and either add it to an existing team meeting or share it, in a way that makes sense for their team. And, they did a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and helped us with role mapping and some other activities. So they were really pivotal in, and at Clorox, I'm also establishing that same kind of, role within the business to help support our change initiatives.
They're also a great source of feedback. So they will also be able to share like what's not going well.
Exactly.
And, and as you were even talking before about like having an advocate for you on the different, on different teams and stuff, I was thinking through this also, like when we're talking about this in terms of enterprise change or within an organizational change, things like that. But all of this applies to our real lives as well. Like, there's a lot of people I think on this call that identify as women. And as women, sometimes it helps us to have somebody who advocates for us in a conference room where we're not there to be able to speak for us. And the same thing for, the LGBTQ community, right? So as an ally, I can be in a room and kind of advocate for some other sort of diversity too. And it's all about getting like so as a change management leader, you have an agenda, right? You have an end goal you're trying to meet. And as anybody working, within a corporate structure, we all have some kind of career goal, developmental goal. So it's all interconnected and related in terms of these processes we use to get there, So it's really like these little puzzle pieces that click together, I just think are so interesting and fascinating. Okay, we're gonna keep going. And let me ask then, what are some of the critical components of your overall change plan?
So critically, I was gonna say for me anyway, is keeping people informed. Really, it's if they don't know what's going on, people make stuff up. I hate to say that, but they do, and they'll make it up, and it'll be the best story ever. And then you have to kind of re-engage people. We have a lot of swirl that goes around. So people, if they don't know, they make it up, and then they start telling people, and then all of a sudden you have to rein. It's like herding cats most of the day. So you have to like bring them all back. Hey, that's not really true. Here's what it is. So the more you can keep people informed up front with what you can share, even when you need to share that you don't have anything to share, it's more important to share, I don't know anything yet, but we plan to have something at this time, than letting people make stuff up, because they will. It's true.
I agree. I would say for me, most people, when they think about change management, they think about training and communication. So that's typical, kind of the components of a good change plan. The reality where the magic is in identifying change impacts and documenting those. It's a surprising little known fact that a lot of our job is analysis, right? And it's very detailed on projects like these. And the reason that's important, so if you think about documenting what's changing, right? And not so much at the level of system training, but up into that point. How is someone's job changing from what it is today to what it is tomorrow? And documenting that in detail, taking that information then and disseminating it throughout really the time before you go live, right? So I think what people miss is they bring in a change person right at the end of the project to communicate the training plan and then to communicate go live, or here's what's happening. What you miss is the opportunity before that to take all those change impacts and start sprinkling them throughout a timeline, right? So you start at the highest level. I always look at it as a funnel. So you take that information and you say, okay, let's start 6 months ahead and let's talk about the high level benefits of what we're doing and why we're changing. And then let's talk in a little more detail in another month about, the key components of what's coming. And then we'll get a little more detailed and talk about some of the system enhancements that are coming. And basically that funnel leads you all the way down, over time to the days before training. So that then when people go to training, they're not asking, well, why are we doing this? And I don't agree with it. I haven't bought on. They're really understanding what's happening and why they're there. And then they can really just focus on the learning, right, at that point. So, I always talk about change being an art and a science. So the science piece of it is gathering all those change impacts and documenting. At Cardinal, we had over 3,000 impacts that we documented as a team. And then taking that information, and the art piece of it is deciding who needs to know the information and when do they need to know it. And then it's that flow of how you share that information before it's actually impacting them directly. And that can be applied to anything, right? You think about any kind of change that you go through, you first become aware of what the change is, and then you might do some more research and learn a little bit more about it, like playing golf. Like I didn't know anything about golf, and then I started researching golf and watching it on TV. And then I moved into, well, hey, I might take a lesson and learn how to hit, the golf ball. And then I might learn how the game's scored, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go through that whole process, but that's really that's the meat, I think, the secret behind change management that so many people forget or don't understand is it's the change impacts are the number one most important thing to get right. And then it's what you do with them. That's the art of it, is knowing how to disseminate the information at the right time.
I agree.
I could talk for hours about that.
So I know that Vinny has asked us to put questions on the chat. It takes me too much time, so I'm just going to ask it. So one of the things, Simon Sinek is one of my favorite, speakers and TED speakers. And they've, kind of mentioned on the power of why. And also you have the adoption cycle, right? So any kind of change to me is changing my behaviors to adopt to something, right? And so do y'all you talked about network and all those kinds of things. Do you use that whole communicating the why? You're always going to have early innovators, right? Who are going to embrace the change and kind of jump in and do things. Then you have the early adopters, and then you have the middle adopters. And at some point, you shouldn't give a damn about the laggards, right? They will come along when hell freezes over. So you cannot, have you all kind of worked out a segment that way and saying, okay, these are the people we are going to involve first, these are the people who come next, and kind of defined it that way? Or have you used that, either of you?
Yeah, go ahead, Anne, if you
I
want
was
to
gonna
answer.
say, we've identified, and I wouldn't say we've gone and said, okay, you're an early adopter, you're this,
Right,
you're
right,
that.
right.
But we do have folks who are really good with change as part of our change network, where they've been
Right.
identified by senior leadership as these people deal well with change, and they have the trust and the backing of their associates. And so people are going to listen to them and follow their lead versus having people on the change network or within those groups that are going to be resistors. So
Right.
we definitely have identified, even as we're moving through things like having the right sponsorship and having the right
Right.
leaders driving the change makes a huge difference. You know, I've worked on other projects where you have a very silent sponsor or silent leader in the project. And if they're not engaged and they're not in front of the associates and they're not talking about it, the associates aren't caring about it. So it has to be a joint effort between like the change team, but then also the leadership and the sponsors. So not so much, and I've put
Yeah,
buckets and I put people in
Right.
the
No,
buckets,
no,
right?
I get it. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And
Rini,
actually,
I really like that. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, I really like that that model when you talk to leaders about their own teams, right? And understanding where their teams fit and where their people fall. So I think it's really valuable as a manager, just a manager, you know, with a team that's going through all sorts of changes within their own job. Who are your early adopters? You know, who can you use to like kind of hype up the team and bring them along? You know, your resistors, you probably need to either be managing up or out, you know, or thinking about what you're planning to do with them,
Exactly.
or the laggards, you know. Yeah. So I think that model, I actually use that model a lot when I just train kind of general change management, you know, to leaders, because I think it's a great model to follow.
So I was going to
Go
say
ahead,
a
Lulu.
couple things. But let's stay on this topic for a second. And I think this goes back to what Anne had said in the previous, in a few minutes ago, like in our previous question, because when we're talking about how there's different levels, there's a different, you know, there's different levels within a company, an organization, enterprise, whatever you. So if you are communicating the change with the higher level leaders and then getting their buy-in, I think that's the key. You get their buy-in, and in talking to them, as we're identifying the resistors, there's going to be active resistors and passive resistors. So as you're meeting with the leaders,
People who sabotage. Let's let's not forget them.
saboteurs.
Saboteurs.
So yes, I just call them passive resistors.
Okay.
You know, because they're stealthy. They're not
Off
as
with their heads. Go on.
Yeah. That's very on brand for you. But
Yep.
you don't want to chop off people's heads because it leads to a lot of paperwork. Then what you may want to do is just kind of like meet with some of them one-on-one, just kind of like like get from them their resistance. And sometimes you can tell if it's petty or if it's something real. So if it's real, then they're going to give you some kind of a real feedback that is actionable. If they're giving you feedback that's not actionable, then this is when you chop, you know, off with their heads. You can't do anything to help with them. I'm sorry, Anne. We're not going to chop their heads off. No, wait, Anne said no.
No,
We
I don't recommend that, but
we
a lot
hardly
of
have
times-
any HR out here. It's only
but I would
a
say
group of professionals.
I would say a lot of times the petty things aren't really petty because they're important to that person. So just
Right.
keep that in mind that what you might think is petty as a person may not be what they think is petty. And a lot of times it's a past experience or something that is causing them to have this fear that drives them into this place where they are resistant. So it's addressing that fear. Listen to them, make them heard, and then addressing it.
See,
And a lot of times you might not think you don't have time for that, but depending on who they are, you'll make time for it because they could be that person who's going to sabotage and you're going to want to cut off their head. But I would highly recommend just, you know, listen and then try to understand where that fear is coming from.
See, this is why we have Anne and Karen here. We have the experts here because if it's up to me and you, Rini, you know,
There'd be a lot of rolling heads.
yeah, it's not going to be good. That's just why we're not in charge of this kind of stuff.
I mean, Karen said it up and out, and I think that's a very, I think a lot of the change management professionals, you know, basically want to make the entire world move with them. And that's a very bad, I'll just say it, it's a very bad way of getting there because our expectations should be managed with early adopters and middle adopters and, you know, sort of the next 10%, but they'll always, for any change, and it may not be the same people, right? I mean, people adopt to different changes at different times. And that last group, we spend tremendous amount of effort in organizations to get everybody on board. And I don't, personally, I think that some of that effort, we should not spend much time on it. They will get on board or they'll be out, you know? The world is going to move on. I mean, that's why I asked that question. So.
No, I got you. And I think that's what we were talking about is getting like the leaders on board, getting then like the high level management and then the middle, I call them middle management.
No, not all leaders. We don't need all the leaders on board. We need the
Key.
the ones that we need help from.
Yeah, but we
Yes.
need their buy-in because when the saboteurs go to other leaders to kind of give their, you know, their feedback that they don't like this or whatever, we need a consistent buy-in. And we need to make sure everybody's aligned from the top down in terms of moving forward with the change. Because if we have the buy-in, and I think this is what Karen was touching on before, is awareness. Get the awareness, make sure that everybody is aligned, right?
A lot.
And then they will take care of the end users for you.
Yep. I would say alignment is key. Agreement is not always. So as long as they can align with you and they're on board with this is what we're doing, whether they agree or not, I don't care. I just need them to align and make sure they're sharing the same messaging.
So consensus versus
consensus,
unanimity.
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And consistency, yeah, for sure. Because that when you have somebody who, when you can send mixed messages, that really, like, I think, what did you say before about if people aren't sure of what's going on, they're gonna make stuff up or they're going to get inside their own heads or, you know, that
Yep.
kind of thing.
I call it swirl. They create swirl.
That's what it was, yeah.
You know, it's stirring the pot a little bit and it creates a big swirl in the organization. And then pretty soon everybody's making stuff up and sharing stuff that's not true. And then I have leaders at the top coming to me and saying, oh my God, I just heard this today. And then I have to figure out how to fix that problem. It happens.
It never happens. It only happens in Alliance data, right, Karen?
Right, yeah. Only in my world.
Okay, I'm gonna get us back on track and say, let me ask this. So we've talked about these different types of initiatives. We've talked about like these different groups you engage with. So what OCM best practices can you share from working on these kinds of initiatives?
Well, I'll start with, you know, it's finding the right team. You know, for me, you know, we don't always have, as change leaders, we don't always have big budgets, you know, to bring in a big team. I was really fortunate at Cardinal to be able to do that. I had a mix of employees and contractors that I brought on. But I will say that it was the most critical component to our team's success was bringing and finding good resources. I wrote an article about it too that's out there. If you want to hear my philosophy on like change management resources, I think if you Google me, it's out there on HR Technology, HR Tech Magazine. But basically, you know, finding good people who can represent what good change management looks like to the organization. As we know, if you find someone who doesn't quite understand it, they go out and start working in that space, they can kind of, you know, color differently the view that people have of what change is. So I'm really critical. I grade high. I always tell I'm a hard grader when it comes to bringing resources and people onto my team, because it's just so critical when so many people don't really understand what we do, that if you have the wrong resources doing that work or not doing the full gamut of work, it can definitely color how people view what good change management is. So I would say that's probably my biggest, and I'm going through that right now at Clorox because I'm hiring my team there to start on another big initiative like Cardinal. And I've been interviewing like all day long. I've been conducting interviews the last few days with contractors and employees, and it's just so important, you know, from a culture perspective, to have the right folks doing that work. You know, you want people who can drive change, obviously, so they need to come with that positive attitude, kind of a global mindset, strategic vision, but also be able to get into the weeds and do that data analysis work. So it's you know, it's an interesting combination of skills that you can find with the right person on your team.
So not to point out, I did hear that Karen is hiring, just letting the crowd know.
I am.
And for me,
sure.
I would add that, like, being able to start building trust. So for me, it's really important that folks trust me to share feedback. They trust my team, that we're looking out for them in their best interest, and that people, you know, want to provide some insight, and they trust that I know the messaging that needs to happen, and that I'm like I said, taking care of them. So for me, it's, you know, it's the building trust, and then following through. So once you have those plans, you're following through. I mean, that's part of that trust building too. It's just making sure you're aligned and that you're following through. I feel like I'm just repeating myself, so I'm gonna stop. It's been a
Hey,
long day.
did either of you use some kind of gamification or incentives, you know, where they get a lot of points, because this is all about behavior changes, right?
Mhm.
And insurance companies are putting, you know, all our Fitbits and everything in to make us walk a few more steps, right? So there is some value to it. And I'm just curious because, you know, at the end of the day, I did do a startup on gamification, exactly changing employee behaviors. So my question is, have you all tried that with SAP implementation at the Cardinal, or the work you're doing in?
So one of the things
We
we are
didn't.
doing with one of our initiatives
Go ahead,
is
Ann.
we are trying to ask folks to say, what does this mean to you? And then put it out there in either Teams, or we have another tool that we're using with hashtags. And then they put the information out there, what it means to them. And then we'll do drawings and things like that and give them like bonus point. We call them pass it on points, but they're just like $10 gift certificates or something like that. And that really like gets our care center associates excited because they like to do stuff like
They
that.
love
So
it.
we are going to
Yeah.
try that with that group to just kind of like put in what you think, hashtag it, and then we'll pick people and we'll see how that works.
Yeah, we for an SAP initiative, you know, it's a little different kind of environment, right? Because it's kind of down and dirty. We're trying to get the information out there as quickly as we can within a certain budget. So I would say we don't really look at things like gamification necessarily for something like that. You know, we had so many different stakeholder groups. We did over 100,000 hours of training for that initiative. So it was really a mixture of process training and system training, you know, and we really just needed to get people up to speed on day one of go live. I do think gamification is a great idea for sustainability. You know, after you go live, you know, how do you continue to get people to leverage the system? And to Ann's point, like customer care and some of those groups are excellent. You know, audiences for those kinds of things. But a lot of the work that I do is just you know, our goal is to get people out the door on day one, you know, being proficient in the system and the tool. And then, you know, I hate to say it because Amanda's here on the call and I know she's leading our sustain organization at Cardinal, but, you know, we kind of go away, the project team goes away and then we hand it over to someone who's been left behind to kind of do some of that stuff. So she's still talking to me, so I guess it's not that bad, but, you know, but that's kind of the, you know, I think gamification is great. It's just a matter of time and place.
Well, I mean, with any SAP implementation, one of the jokes that I always had, and actually I did talk to Cardinal a few years ago about this whole thing, was how do you make people get away from, you know, downloading everything, pulling up it on Excel file and running their analytics there? Because, you know, our generation just lives on Excel related analytics, and they don't want to use any kind of crystal reporting or anything else or anything new. So, that issue comes up a lot. I'm sure at my other clients, people don't hide their Excel files anywhere, right? I mean, they all use what we tell them to do. Right? So anyway, Dhruva, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I had to ask these questions.
we
You
could
should have
definitely
seen
do a
the
whole nother meeting about adoption,
Yep.
adoption metrics
Yes.
and things like that. That would be another good topic down the line sometime.
Yep.
you should have seen Rachel's
I
face
do
when
want to
you
make
said,
just one disclaimer. Can I just, oh, sorry, can I just do one disclaimer too? I just want to make sure people know I'm not representing Cardinal today. I'm not authorized to speak on the company's behalf. I just want to make sure people understand that since I mentioned that project a few times. This is just some of my experiences with the ERP program. So just want to get the disclaimer out there.
I also want to say one other thing about with the best practices, and this is something that I think when we were talking about getting the feedback loop and whether it's something that's like an actionable item that's a real critique of it,
Hey,
or
I'm
if it's just something petty and Rini, are you saying something?
I think Reenie's internet canceled her for a minute. You may continue.
Yeah, I'd say that's the universe. Rini, are you back? Okay, I think. Am I freezing up for anybody? Because I think the two of them are freezing up for me.
Dhruva, it's not you.
Okay, good. I'm gonna keep talking. Yeah, we'll just mute Rini, and we'll keep going. Sorry, Rini. I have to do a dig. Oh, I know what I was saying. So sometimes when it's petty, and what I learned from you today is maybe if you think it's petty, just keep digging, ask the 5 whys maybe, and maybe you'll get to a substantial answer that is actionable, because maybe it's just somebody who's not willing, who's not either not, I don't want to say not willing, because I don't want to assume any kind of malicious intent or anything like that, but not comfortable sharing either with themselves, they don't know what their true reason is, or they're not comfortable sharing it out loud for some reason. And so one thing we learned, I learned from Scott Kirkendall, who is a Zeta star, by the way, is that you want to meet people where they're at. And when he that's like putting yourself in their shoes, getting on that same level with them to try to get that true, honest feedback that might be actionable. That's something that I've learned from the two of you. So, because otherwise, before I was like, forget about them. We're going to move forward over here. You guys can be back there, So I appreciate this discussion, because I feel like you're making me become a better person. And I'm sure my parents will also appreciate this newfound tolerance. Okay, so let me end with this final question. So with everything we've discussed so far, what is the most critical key, you think, to your success as a leader?
I would say for me, it's been networking and building those relationships, over communicating, and then confidence, or sounding like I'm confident even when I'm not. So saying all the right things to make people believe what you're, and then following through. So like for me, it's really about the over communicating and building those relationships with people so that they know to come to you, but they also know that what you're telling them is the right thing.
Yeah, I think for me, especially during the pandemic, I became a little bit more vulnerable as a leader and shared more. We all learned more about people's personal lives, right? You're seeing, I have 2 dogs actually. You've probably only seen one, but I've got another one running around here. But seeing that personal side of someone, and I think I really took a step back as a leader during the pandemic and said, how can I make it real for people that we're all in this together. We're humans, we're facing this unprecedented situation that we've never seen before. And then having the conversations that maybe we don't always want to have about mental health and how are people doing, and asking those questions of your team members to make sure people are doing okay. But also from a change perspective, learning to change plans on the fly. We have to practice what we preach as change leaders. And so if something's not working, saying, what, this isn't working, we're going to try a different path. We're going to scrap this and do something different. And we had to do that even, I think, with some of when I talked about the hypercare plan, some of those plans didn't always work out in the beginning. So we had to kind of change course and try something different. But as a leader, being open to being like, what, we tried something and maybe my idea wasn't the best idea. So we're going to go with somebody else's idea and try it a different way. So I just think overall, I've always been big on being vulnerable as a leader and admitting when you're wrong and, what is that, fail fast, right? Figure it out quickly and try something else and move forward. So I'll leave you with those nuggets.
I'll say that was the first time I've heard this term hypercare. I've never heard it before. I'm kind of interested to hear from the others on this call if you guys use that term. I used the term white glove service before, and I've heard like concierge service before. Do you guys use hypercare or do you use something else, like to help your users afterward?
We called it babysitting or kindergarten.
And where that would
What it feels
be,
like.
let's Rachel works at another big company in Columbus. If you want to out yourself, I do,
Yeah. Well, so I work for Chase right now, but I didn't use it there yet. I used it at a previous organization, which was very small. Only had about 400 total employees, and only about 250 or so were actually using our software daily. So it was still babysitting.
I'll try that at Clorox and see what they think. You never know.
One last question I have is measuring success or having metrics all along to kind of look at, change management, and what kind of metrics have you guys even used, or do you want to talk about it? Because I'm sure at this very, very high level, that's the justification for investing in organizational change management comes in. So is the least amount of complaints to senior leadership? Like, what is it that you use?
We did readiness surveys. We actually did 3 readiness surveys prior to go live, starting at 9 months. So we did 9, 6, and 3 months with our end users. So that those readiness surveys gave us data to kind of tweak, our engagement activities along the way. We also did scorecards, which I will tell you in our first phase at Cardinal, those scorecards did more goodwill for change management than actually gave information. I just put our deliverables on that page. Like, we did a stakeholder analysis, we did a change impact assessment, and I just marked it off as like complete. And we shared that with like general leaders in the business, and they were amazed. They're like, wow, these are all the things you've already done for us. And it was great. It actually really helped just generate like awareness of what change is. And it's something I'll probably be doing at Clorox, because we're kind of in the same place right now of kind of early stages of having change. So those are just a couple ideas.
How about you?
We're doing surveys, responses to surveys, and how do people feel about the change? What are their feelings? Feedback. It's hard to, feedback from leadership, how they feel things are going. So it's hard to get like a true metric, I think, of things like, sales. Well, no, that's probably not going to be it. But we will do especially as we because part of our transformation is getting our care center associates. So it'll be things like we'll measure handle time. Did it change? Did it get worse? How are they doing? If we got them ready for this change, handle time shouldn't change, right? It should be about the same. It shouldn't take them any longer on the phones and things like that. So we will use some of our existing metrics to say, How well did we prepare them for the change based on what they were doing before? So we'll do some comparison in the end.
Yeah, right. And I think it is also dependent on what is it that you're changing, right? I mean,
Absolutely,
so
for
an
sure.
SAP implementation versus, launching a new product. I mean, it's a whole different,
Yes, very
thing.
different.
Everybody else is silent. Laura, questions?
I do have a quick question, if you don't mind, and I'm going to just say
Yeah.
it instead of put it in
Yeah.
the chat, though. But if you're not the change manager, but you're on a team, and this change is coming to your team, and you talked about, like, I'm sure there's the leaders that you love to work with, and those that are the tough ones. The leaders that you love to look with, what characteristics do they have that make them somebody that helps you to bring change to your teams? Yeah, are they the ones that just say, "Yeah, I agree with you. We'll do what you need," or what are the qualities that really help them to be good in those roles?
I would say yes. I like it when they say, yeah, yeah, we'll do whatever you want. But that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who, one can kind of push back and say, hey, have you thought about X, Y, Z? Have you considered this, that, and the other thing? Because I really need like more of that feedback to say, okay, have you thought through everything? So I do like it when people ask me those kinds of questions, but also somebody who is a good communicator, who can articulate things well, somebody who has again, I'm going back to trust, but who has the trust of their department. Like you can have somebody who can articulate really well, but people don't trust them. Well, they're not going to be able to move people along. So you're looking for somebody who can, maybe question you and ask you the right questions so you can, prepare for that. I want to be prepared, but then also somebody who can articulate what you need them to articulate and can have the people behind them because they already trust them and existing.
Influence people.
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
That's great. Thank you.
So I have a question for Laura Coffey.
Okay.
Your
All right.
name, this is your first meeting, right? I mean,
Yes.
first event with us.
Uh-huh.
Did you send out like a newsletter or something like that? Because your name sounds so familiar and I somehow associate it with some newsletter that comes to my email.
I have a group called Books, Bourbon, and Business. I don't know if you've ever signed up for that or if you. And then I'm also with Vinny at Tech Elevator, and
Okay.
I've been a
Okay.
business owner before that for 5 years. So
Okay.
that name, it's an unusual name, so it's very possible that it has come.
Yeah, like it says,
across
like I just can visualize something that comes in my email and
Yeah.
it says, if you have any questions, ask Laura Coffey.
There you go.
Because that's how I remember it.
That's funny. Well, I hope I don't bug you too often. That's not good.
Those are
Hey,
great
Lisa.
sessions too. If you haven't gone, you should check out the Books, Bourbon, and Coffee. Or
Yes,
Books,
it's a
Bourbon, and
lot of
Business.
fun.
I was gonna say coffee.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a good time. Yeah.
Hey, Lisa, do you have any questions, comments? You guys hiring a lot of change professionals?
Here we
Good
are.
to hear. Okay.
Hi. Sorry about that. No, this was really informative and great. Thank you. I think change management is sometimes difficult to articulate and probably difficult to understand if it's, so I think it was a really nice breakdown of how to break it out into a process. So I do appreciate that.
I always say that we have the #1 job that everyone thinks they want, but no one really understands what it is. Like everybody wants us,
For
but
sure.
nobody knows what we do. Yeah, which is great. I mean, it's a good position to be
yeah.
in, I guess.
I had the first time I didn't know what one was. I was like, what is this OCM role? And typically the roles that I hire for are tech based. And this came across my desk. I was like, all right, so what is this? And so fortunately someone was really kind and sat down with me and like, okay, here's what this is and here's how it works. And yeah, it was really far more in depth than I think I really ever understood.
Sorry, dog's barking. They're barking in agreement with you.
I like it.
Robin and Rachel, questions? Nope. Okay. Amanda, Felicia? Last thoughts, Mr. Vinny?
Last thoughts, please follow us on the socials. Love to hear you. Love to see you at the next event. As Dhruva and Rini have plugged several times through this, become a Zeta Star. Get on our Slack workspace. Come hang out with us. Ask us questions. Interact with the community there. I know we all can't always be at every meetup that we have, but it's exciting to be able to chat with each other asynchronously as well. But otherwise, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists for coming. And if you're a Zeta Star, you'd have access to this recording. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you later. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank